welcome back to Mr. Obsolete's Vintage Homesteading. This will be part 3 in our Poulan Wild Thing chainsaw wannabe. Anyway, we're going to be going over a lot more of the features and what we're going to do to it. So let's get started. So started working on it and showed you some of the problems with it in the first video. This thing was exceptionally dirty. It had never been cleaned. Took quite a while to get all the stuff out of here, but it was so dirty that even the fins on the flywheel here were packed with sawdust and grime. So anyway, we got all that out of there and did a little looking on these saws. Actually made several different variations on them. Most of them were 40cc, and this one actually turns out to be 42cc, and I can't imagine why they changed that, but you know, just stupid, I guess. But anyway, I was looking at some information on the bigger Poulans and all the problems these saws suffer from. One of them is that they don't like to start when they're hot, especially the bigger ones. And it's kind of interesting what the problem is. You can see the ignition module here. What they do is when they get hot, since they're mounted in plastic, the plastic warps and the distance between the coil here and the magnet widens up, and so when it's hot it has a weak spark and won't start properly. The other thing is that they run hot, and so they vapor lock readily too. But now this one is an early version. You can see the cutout here where it goes onto the cylinder. Actually has the air can come out really good. On the bigger ones and the later ones, that's cut in half. And there again it goes back to overheating and vapor locking. So if you have one of these that's prone to that problem, you can just simply modify it like this and get the airflow going again on it. And it should alleviate the problem. And then, like I say, check the clearance between the flywheel magnet and your coil and adjust it if it's too wide. So I started putting the fuel lines in. I got one in. The other line I have isn't the correct size, so I ordered some, but it got lost in the mail. So I'll do that on the next video. But this saw, like I said, was a factory reject because it ran for more than a few hours. It's actually got a fair amount of wear on the clutch teeth and for the chain there. So whoever had it actually got some reasonably good service out of it. I've rebuilt the carburetor. When I was cleaning out the fuel tank, it had 2 filters in there. So the fuel lines breaking off these is a real common problem. And you can see this was the last one was in there. It's fairly clean, but you can't blow through it. And this one's got a lot of varnish and crud in it. There again, you can't blow through it, so it needs to be replaced. And the carburetor on it, you know, that's the main thing these saws always need. Somebody had done a nice job on the carburetor because this little plate here is made out of mylar. There's a little flap valve here and here, and that lets the fuel come in and then go through the carburetor. And these last a whole lot longer than the neoprene ones. And the main failure point on any of these is this diaphragm here. This pulses back and forth. That's what pumps the fuel, but this one is rock hard almost. It still moves, but just barely. So it wouldn't pump fuel. So anyway, just weird stuff on these. The fuel we have today is the culprit. It's so bad. There's something on the fuel found that was kind of interesting. Ethanol is the worst thing because it corrodes the carburetors and damages any neoprene stuff. But there's some other stuff that they use. It's a butane based to make the fuel today, and it attacks the diaphragms and stuff too. So even if you have stable in it, eventually they go bad. They just have to rebuild them all the time. It's just part of the way things are. So anyway, just wanted to talk about some of the other flaws of these saws. The fuel cap here is a nice big filler, and when you're cleaning the saw you want to put some fresh gas in there, put the cap on, shake it vigorously to get all the sawdust out of it, but it uses an O-ring to seal it here, which is good, but when it's all the way in, there's a gap between that and the main body of the saw, and so real fine sawdust gets in here, and if you've got it on its side to fuel it, every time you open it up that sawdust goes right in it. And so what I do in a crappy saw like this, I have an old toothbrush, I just go around and brush it out, and that keeps the problem from happening. So anyway, see the clutch sides cleaned up pretty nice too, and the drum's lubed and everything's working good. The only unknown is the oil pump, which is in behind here, but we'll have to get it running first. And then the other thing that's really poor on this little teeny area right here lets the air into the air filter, and then it brushes up against the rest of the filter, so it's rather restrictive. There's the size of the filter. Yeah, so that was rather stupid. So anyway, we'll rectify that when we get it ready to run. The other thing, actually these are fairly easy to work on. The fuel lines are a little difficult to get in. There's lots of good videos on doing them, so I won't really go into it. But I'm going to talk briefly about the chains these things use. These came with a safety chain, which this is. Came with 2 of them. And they're both made by Oregon and they're number 91. But there's a substantial difference between them, and we'll have to come over and do a close-up on them. I'll show you the weirdness of them. Okay. Okay, well you can see here's the main tooth, here's the cutter. Right here's the raker, and that distance here gauges your cutting depth. If you look real close right here, there's a little raker that sticks up, and it actually comes out a little bit higher than this, so that when this goes around the bar, the cutter is below that area. This one's got enough wear in it, it can still cut, but anyway, that's the idea behind these. And then I'll put on the other chain, which is like new. Like I say, they're both the same number 91 Oregon. Okay, now come back here. Like I say, you can see the tooth here and the raker, and you can see this big raker right here, and that prevents the tooth from cutting because it sticks out so far. That way, that's anti-kickback, so the thing can't get a good bite, and as it comes around it might get a little bite right there, but there, right here again, these are prevent you from cutting. So that's these are for obviously non-professional use. They don't cut very good either, but this saw was never intended for anybody except for somebody who didn't know anything about chainsaws. Okay, well, here's to show you that this saw is just for a beginner, because sometimes when you take a chain off, put a new chain on, you forget which way it goes. Well, the factory made a little picture here for you, so I have to, if you can read and see a picture of it and match up your chain, then you know that in an arrow you'll figure out which way it goes on. So it would be on the saw this way and the bar would come out here, so the teeth would run in that direction. There again, a little arrow and a picture of the chain. Okay, well, here's another problem with this saw. But I can't imagine why they've made it this way. I'll take the muffler off. Okay, there's a plate here. We need to clean that, but you can see all the carbon here has been blowing past there, so I'll have to make a new gasket on it. But the main thing about this, I kept looking around trying to figure out, gee, where's the exhaust come out of this thing? And get these two little teeny ports right on the back side here. I mean, they're just little bitty holes. And then that plate goes right here against it. And so you can see that the exhaust is very restrictive on this. You know, it would have been very simple just to put a couple of holes in the screen right here. And there you can see all the carbon in there. There's a spark arrestor, and it's pretty dirty too. You can't see any light through it particularly. So it's just got a light layer of crud and a big heavy hunk of carbon right there. And then this is full of carbon too. And then you can see all the ick that's been leaking out the back here. But yeah, it's just amazing that two little holes, and this one's about half plugged with carbon. So anyway, you need to maintain these old saws, no matter if they're good or bad like this one. The other thing is kind of interesting on this plastic is really heavily stained. And I tried a couple of different cleaners on it and didn't touch it. I actually sanded it with some 600 grit paper and started to take it off, but not really. So I guess if you're a spit and polish guy and you want to restore your crappy saw like this for show and tell, you're going to spend hours cleaning it up. But anyway, I'm not going to bother. Well, here's the components of the exhaust. This is the spark arrestor. I can't really see through it, but I'm going to try spraying some brake clean through it and see if it goes through. Yeah, sort of. So it's not completely plugged up. But anyway, like I say, here's the muffler again, and these little 90-degree elbows, there's two of them. That's where the outlet for the exhaust, and you can see that just knock some carbon out of them. And there's a lot of carbon in there. It's got to come out. This wouldn't get into the port very easily because this fits in like this, and then the cover goes on top of it. But you know, it's way too restrictive. So we're going to open that up once we get it running. So what we're going to do, we're going to have it running in a completely stock form, and then we're going to do some modifications. So we'll do some modifications on the muffler and also on the air intake. And that's as far as we'll go as mods go on this. But I've had some suggest that you can advance the timing and port them and all that stuff, and you can make them put out reasonable horsepower. But I have the answer to that. It's a lot simpler. I just go out to the garage and get my Cola Mini Mac, and it'll eat it alive. So anyway, there we are. Okay, well, that'll conclude part 3. So we got a little surprise for you.